Okay, let's get started.
All
All
right.
right, welcome everyone to the first episode of Supply Chain Management Podcast. Uh, we want to try something new between myself and Satya here. We'll start with some quick introductions. We want to do a video podcast where we want to connect and share our experiences from the past and probably keep the supply chain community up to date with the latest news and trends in supply chain. With that, I'll
All right.
turn it over to you, Satya. Start with your intro.
Hey, Uday. I think it's a great idea to start because even if you have to know something about supply chain these days, though we are from supply chain background, but if I have to find something related to supply chain, I feel that there is a lot of information that can be made available to the audience as such, exactly like in terms of what's happening these days and how is that people even understand what about supply chain is. Right? So especially after COVID, you can understand, right? These people are talking about a lot of supply chain. You can hear that, especially if you talk about the automotive chips and all, especially we found ourselves into all these supply chain concerns and all. Now, thanks God, at least people are hearing of this keyword, which is supply chain. And when I had to introduce myself to others, when they asked me what exactly you do, like when I used to tell them I'm a supply chain planner, they was like, "Who is that?" Because most of the times, if you see here, right, back in India, people would say like, "I'm working in IT company" and all those things. And now, as supply chain guys who are working in a corporate world, now you are working in Microsoft and I'm working for Western Digital, and we have been working for so long, right, in supply chain management. Now, if I have to introduce myself to anyone, I have to say like I work in supply chain management. People don't have any clue what exactly supply chain management. Now, thanks to this, after post COVID, like especially people start hearing about okay, we have these supply chain issues because of this. These chips, automotive chips are not available. The lead times of cars have gone up. People are booking the cars. They're getting the car like probably a year after, and also so people don't understand what exactly supply chain. Now, before even we go into the details, we have been working in supply chain management from past 13 years. What I would want, to understand from you is that how basically you got into this, right? And also, what I want to understand is your, the framework that you have been thinking all these lines, and also like, how basically right along your career, right from your academic background to your corporate life, how things shaped up, what actually made you to get into this, to better, get a better understanding of, how you used to think of all these things. So why don't you actually go ahead and, tell
Yeah.
something about yourself, brief, right from your academic background to corporate
Yeah,
world.
let me do that. I think I thought you were going to do, but you're turning over to me. That's fine. So, so currently, I mean, I've been in supply chain for 13 years. I currently work at Microsoft in the cloud supply chain. And I'm located here in Austin, Texas, and Satya is located in Bangalore. And we have been classmates from like bachelors back in Hyderabad, and then we did masters here, and we'll talk more on that. But so yeah, I think going back to the story on how I ended up in supply chain. So I did engineering, I graduated in 2007, like probably almost everybody in India, and then I picked mechanical engineering when I was in bachelor's. As I was researching things when I was in 12th grade, I found out like at least some of the topics which are in mechanical engineering are something more relatable for me. Example like mechanics, friction, and the topics like probably related to electrical engineering were a little bit intimidating for me. Basis like 12th grade physics. That's how I landed in mechanical engineering. But after like 2 years into it, year and a half, I figured this is not something I'm interested in. All the fluid dynamics, learning about turbines, dynamics of machines. So I had less interest in the core subjects of mechanical, and I had more interest in like probably C programming, certain things like machine drawing, and other things. So that's what happened. So I said I will probably switch my area of study if I'm going to do a master's. So once that point came about third year, early fourth year, I was researching what would I do. So I have no work experience, so doing an MBA is not something maybe not a viable thing immediately, I figured I would suit better to something which is uh, more relatable to day-to-day life. And basis little knowledge I had, I didn't know anybody who's working in supply chain, almost zero. We had one subject, operations research, in our like mechanical engineering. It was interesting, and basis little bit research we did, I thought this could be relatable, products moving, and then how do products come to like a customer, like what happens in manufacturing. So that's how I picked industrial engineering as my major when I moved to US for masters, and then since then I've been working in that area. I think I'll talk more details as we go along, but I'll turn it over to
Yes.
Satya for him to give his quick background.
Wow. Wow. So it's been like, I think 20 years we have known each other, right? It's like close
Yeah,
to 20 years. And then I know how we started our journey in Hyderabad, where we chose a bachelor's. We were in mechanical engineering,
right.
and people used to call it mechanical as evergreen. So yeah, quite funny the way we started out. Actually, I would share my experience. So when I got into engineering, I'm not sure if you know this, but I chose computer science during my
Yeah,
first counseling. I chose computer science, and I actually spent 2 weeks, learning computer science in my first year actually. And then I don't know, for some reason I realized that this computer science, be it electronics or whatever it is, somehow I felt that it is not my cup of cake actually. Uh, and then what happened was that people used to tell me, especially right, how these uncle and aunties around you, they shape up how basically they manipulate, and they the decision that you take, they
I,
actually play a
I have a
big role.
comment on it. I'll make it once you finish your background. I'll come back to the evergreen part.
So when people got to know during that time, right, like 2003 and all, I don't know, for some reason the IT and computers was not in great shape. And what me most of the people actually discouraged me, like, why did you take computer science? It was like a big sin at that point of time if you would have taken computer science. And most of the people, kind of demotivated me, like, and they told me like mechanical engineering is the one you should take because that's evergreen. And see, we at that point of time, we were not that mature enough, and like we went with the flow. Okay, like if people are saying something, it could be for a reason, right?
Right.
So why do we risk ourselves, spend 4 years doing something, and we find ourselves in a soup where we find no takers. So so basically, my decision making was shaped up with what actually the what people used to talk in the neighborhood. So I went back to the counseling again, and I changed my department from computer science to mechanical engineering. So that's how basically, and also a friend of mine who also he who used to tell me that he'll take mechanical engineering. And that time we didn't have cell phone. So I thought he'll also take mechanical engineering. And I also, ended up taking mechanical engineering. And what it turned out to be that that guy chose computer science and I ended up in mechanical engineering. But nevertheless, apart from this, for some reason, I used to feel like, I don't know, like, though it was very early in my career, for some reason, I was not very comfortable with programming actually. I don't know why. Though I have not done programming before as well, but for some reason I thought that programming is something I won't be that interested as such. I don't know. This just came so naturally to me. And also what happened was that when I took mechanical engineering, I thought that you understand, right? Like when we get into engineering and all, the whole perception that the way we would do engineering will be entirely different. So I thought I'll be working on some, let's say, some automobile or some
Right, right.
machine and all those things. That's how the perception was, right? So I thought, okay, I'll get to do something which is like something physical, which I can see from my naked
Right.
eyes and all
Yeah.
these things, and I can relate pretty much to it.
Right.
Unlike computer science, where
Yeah.
whole life you actually get into, you just put things in a system and all, you cannot relate to as such. So yeah, so that's how I got into mechanical engineering. And to be frank enough, yes, it was there were few subjects which I like, and there were some which I didn't like as such. So though I was interested in mathematics, all I used to do was just solve problems, whether it was thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, and all those things. But what I realized was that I was just solving the problems, but I was not trying to understand the nuances or the physical aspect of the of those core subjects as such. And this actually This is something I realized like, probably 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, I was like, though I did mechanical engineering, like you can take any subject, whether it is
Right.
related to automobile or whatever it is, I barely understood anything as such. Like, yeah, if you ask me any problem, how to solve it, okay. But I was using mathematics, but I was not using my physical concepts, or I was not able to understand how physically those things were working and all this. Basically the physics part of it, something which I believe I lacked, and I felt that it was just it doesn't have to be just only mathematics, but it has to be physics as well. And that's when you realize that okay, you're understanding something, and that's when you think that you can go to the next level. And that's where I felt that I was not justifying to the things that I was doing. And then I thought that this is definitely, though I've done mechanical engineering, but I'm nowhere related to that such. And I thought to myself that I should be doing something which I feel I'm a bit connected to it, and also that can help me out, down the lane. So that's when I started searching, and actually I put down. I just honestly, used to talk to myself like, what is that I am kind of interested. And see, this also being from a business background, like my parents, they have this grocery store, so I understand a little bit of nuances, like how basically that business works out. Like basically for them is that you procure materials, you get it, you sell it to the customers, understand the customer's requirement on a day-to-day basis, and that's how you kind of understand the regular demand, and based on that that what all key items you need to have procure it, and procure it at the right cost, and from right suppliers, so that the quality doesn't impact. So these are the key things that I understood, because
Right.
when my brothers and my parents, they used to talk, this is what I used to hear from the masses. So that this is the key things I understood. And though it was fascinating for me, and that's what I thought, though it was fascinating for me, I thought that this is something I can find out, in my academic background, which can also not just interest me, but I can make out something out of it. So that's when, after searching a lot, I just came across this industry engineering when I was thinking of doing masters actually. So industry engineering is something I felt that this is something which is core, or which is very much related to my interest. And after doing a lot of research, I found out, some of the good schools in USA, good colleges in the USA, which offer this industry engineering program. I know both of us have done this research. So I ended up going to Texas A&M University for industrial engineering, and you went for Georgia Tech, right? That's how we
Yeah.
went with masters in industry engineering, and that's where we got to know about the supply chain management. Especially
Right.
when we were in USA, we got to know about this concept of supply chain management. I don't think we would have heard this word before as such. And especially in USA, if you see, you'll have this lot of distribution centers, distribution
Yeah. Right.
companies,
Right.
which are into this business, and it's a very big business. When I, like, especially I was in Texas, I realized, okay, there are very big companies who are into this industrial distribution, and the key part they play in supply chain management, right? It was very,
Yeah.
very fascinating. So I
Right.
thought like it's
Right.
very big, very, very big industry. And that is something which was like unheard of in India as well, right? Supply chain management. That's what I thought, that
Yeah.
it's supply chain management is, I would say, is it's a part of our daily lives. It's just a
Right.
keyword that people might not be aware of, but it happens, whether in a
Right.
tangible or intangible, but it happens every day in your day-to-day life. Like right from morning where you get your milk packets, everything revolves around supply chain management.
Mm.
The whole process, it might sound very straightforward or very simple, but there's a lot of background work that goes in, right? Like
Right.
people who are who's driving the supply chain, it's very fascinating to understand what actually goes behind it, how they plan for it. And yeah, so
I want to address a couple of things from your intro.
okay,
Yes,
sure.
funny things actually. So when I think I'm sure people are still talking about this evergreen mechanical engineering thing. One of the biggest probably realizations you can see it happens quite often is people who don't know about some things actually have a bigger opinion about things, right? So you usually hear from uncles and aunties who never actually worked in a company or a corporate setting or anywhere talk about mechanical being evergreen. But I think I have an important, nuanced, and useful point to make. So, as I'm going through career for 13 years, one of the observation I had is I think as a human civilization is evolving, we have different industries and different actually disciplines actually come through the evolution process, right? So if you take like the core of mechanical engineering was probably very prominent around like late 1800s, early 1900s when we had steam engine, various new sort of inventions happening. Cars came in like early 20s you can say, or 1915, 14, 1905, and there was railroads in late 1800s, and then
Mhm.
aeroplanes later on, and then probably more so I think we'll talk about retail a little bit later. But the point I'm trying to make is during that huge boom happening in industry, whatever is the core part for that industry, that actually gets highlighted and that makes the prominence. Okay. So if you take in the last 20, 30 years, it's been computer science, information technology. And then these are the companies, Amazon, Google, Facebook, all this became really big companies. And if you think about it, the core people in that company are computer science engineers who really do the product. It would have been the same thing in automobiles or all like building bridges, late 1800s. They call evergreen, but I mean, human life doesn't die in one day. A lot of disciplines actually continue for evergreen. But really, with respect to making great careers and also like being able to ride the waves, I would say if you are in the middle of some kind of a technical invention and where your discipline has prominence, I think you'll ride the ship very well and you'll go with the wave. So your career will also be very exaggerated. This I'm saying looking back at my friends who are in computer science the last 15, 20 years, they had tremendous careers because there's a supply demand mismatch which happens when an industry is growing and you need engineers from that discipline. That's not the case with mechanical engineering because it's evergreen, it's matured. There are enough trained people, right? When there is something new, the demand is actually faster than the supply. That's like one thing I want to make a comment. Second thing, I had a cousin who said, "Hey, I don't want to actually sit in front of a computer, so I don't want to take computer science, but take mechanical engineering or something else." I told him one thing: unless you're working as a mechanical engineer on the plant floor, there's some jobs you do, right? Or an operations person, you will always be sitting in front of a computer, running like your um, like hydraulics models, designing models, doing AutoCAD, all the things you'd be using a computer and doing it on a desk. I think this is some basic fundamental thing people who don't work in the industry, like I'm not trying to belittle, but as a general awareness, they lack. Right? That is a big decision. You're telling I don't sit in front of you do everything in front of your computer or phone today. Okay.
Yeah. I
so
know.
that so that idea that you're going to be there somewhere is completely misplaced. So that's something I wanted to address as new folks who are trying to get into this area or choose a career, something they should think really hard about.
No, no, yeah, I completely agree to your point. Actually, it's a very, very valid point that you need to understand how, the industry is shaping,
Yeah.
what are the trends. Basically, you need to understand, like, whenever we take a major decision, whether be it what career you want to choose,
Yeah.
be from academic point of view, the most important thing, as you mentioned, right, we need to understand how basically what kind of sector today and what is the trend that is happening as such.
Right.
We cannot take back what has happened 50 years, 40
Right.
years, and as you rightly pointed out, something which is pretty much mature. Then for you, the scope for you to do any drastic improvement or something, come up with a breakthrough technology, chances are very, very less.
Yeah.
And it's more like I would say kind of a maintenance thing that you will be doing.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is like basically look out for the things that you think will shape up the world in the coming 20, 30 years
I
and
think
see
nowadays people have a lot of access to information with internet. Like nowadays
exactly.
we are using dial-up internet back in 2005, 6, a little bit of broadband came in, but still the web pages and all that, what to search itself is not something you could know. There's no YouTube. I mean, now you could learn a lot of things watching some videos. But in US, this concept of like vocational training by taking internships while you're like doing your bachelor's greatly helps people to really understand whether they like something or try out other things. We can move on to like a next topic actually in general. I mean, as you're talking on this, I want
Yes.
to actually take a slightly different topic which came to me right now. I mean, we talk supply chain as a very monolithic, like a one size fits all, which is that's in a way it exists that way. That's not really true. And I worked in different. I never worked in supply chain. Satya worked in. I worked in different kind of supply chain. There are certain concepts and things which you can borrow, but really the nuances of stuff can be very, very different. So I'll just highlight the kind of supply chains I worked in. Maybe Satya can do the same thing for him and talk a little bit. So I worked in distribution supply chains where there's a wholesaler selling products to like B2B setting. So it's a very much an inventory, moving the products type of a problem there, asset, utilization type of problem. And then of course you are storing, warehousing, transportation, those things exist, but the core aspect of supply chain around like managing your inventory, asset, and efficiency will become really big. So replenishment planning are big things, inventory planning are big things over there. And then I worked in process manufacturing. So even in process manufacturing, you'll have a portion which is distribution, and you say you store the product and you ship. But at the core in the process manufacturing, I worked in food industry. So you get bunch of ingredients, you process them, and then pack them, and then you take them out. So when you're processing, it's like you have a magnified kitchen in a food sense, right? So you get sugar, dough, everything, you mix it up, then you heat it, then you cool it, then you pack it, and then you pack it into like the full pallet, and then you ship it out. So this process manufacturing, this is how the process manufacturing works. So in these like big concepts like capacity planning, how do you finite scheduling, all this become really important part of the supply chain, and plants become the heart of action. Distribution is important, but the cost of making the product, distribution will be 10%, and the manufacturing cost will be probably like 30%, and ingredients will be 30-40%. So there's an element around sourcing too, but that's how the breakout happens. And then Satya can talk about the supply chains he worked in. Then I'll try to highlight some of the, we were talking about industries evolving, some of the newer supply chains which came up in the last 10-15 years as we were doing our career.
Yes, that's a good point over there. So have been working in semiconductor industry from past 13 years. So right from beginning of my career, I have changed companies, and almost all the companies were in semiconductor business. So I started like, let's say, with Applied Materials. They basically make equipments which actually go to in other semiconductor companies, which is basically needed for your regular production work, whether it is testing, assembly, or whatever it is, right? So from Applied Materials, and then I work for Cypress. They make chips, and those chips actually go into different applications, be in your automotive cars, and our end consumer products like your laptop or phones and all. So they used to make those chips. And then coming back to Western Digital, we are basically a storage company where we basically make this memory products, which again goes to your end-to-end products, which is like a laptop, phones, and also your HDDs, which goes into the laptop, right? So speaking about my experience in semiconductor industries, what I understand is this is a very capital intensive industries. Okay, and even what I heard is from most of the people, unlike retail, this supply chain of semiconductors is very, very complicated, right? Of course, it's a very, very there's a lot of technology involved, that is there for sure. But as I said, it's a capital intensive industries. The supply chain becomes very, very complicated. And the supply chain is very complicated because, as I said, the technology keep changing, right? So you have to be on top of your toes in upgrading yourself to the new technologies, and how basically the supply chain management, the supply chain tools that we use can actually adhere to our business needs. That is a key thing here in supply chain, right? Especially in
I just
semiconductors.
want to highlight one thing as Satya is talking. He didn't mention a lot about it, but I think the semiconductor side, he did talk to me some time back. There are two big components on the front side and the back side. He talks about fab manufacturing, and then the back end is probably little more of assembly of the silicon into some of the other like peripheral components, which is probably a little more simpler. But the front side fab is a capital intensive, billions of dollars spent, and clean rooms, a lot of water needed, and very complicated processes. I don't have much of understanding on those things. Concepts can be borrowed probably to use like general capacity production ideas like that, but I think it's a very complicated space which has been probably in existence for not too long. Honestly, like a food supply chain, just to add, like General Mills, a company I worked, has been in existence for over 100 years. Yeah. So if you think about it, a flour mill is like one of the example of a basic process, right, which exists. semiconductor probably like a 40-year-old industry. It's been there since 70s and 80s. So relatively a newer supply chain, which is in existence. I think Satya, you have any other kind of supply chains you worked in? Otherwise, I'll want to make some comments on like some of the newer supply chains you are observing of late.
No, yeah, as I mentioned, right, my pretty much worked into semiconductor supply chain. That's where I've been
Yeah.
pretty much exposed to. But yeah, you can actually put up your points
Yeah,
more
let
than
me let me talk. So I think I'm trying to drive home the point that especially if you're working in one kind of a supply chain, there are a lot of nuances you learn, which are not just concepts, but even like basic application, how to think about even a utilization rate, for example, is there in semiconductor and process manufacturing. How do you read that, and how do you think about concepts like that will vary a lot. But some of the newer supply chains we have seen come up in the last 20-25 years would be one is e-commerce supply chain. That never existed, right? So before that, Walmart came into existence roughly in 60s when they created this big box store in the US. And DMart is trying to replicate that in India in the last 20 years in some sense. So Walmart actually has these central distribution centers and stores are existing in suburbs and cities and they send products, people go to the store and they buy. Essentially that has been changed with e-commerce. They You have multiple delivery points and you have even a much bigger distribution center, and then the distribution center sorting, pick pack shipping, all that gets very complicated. In a process manufacturing B2B setting, we're sending to B2B, the sorting is not that complicated, and then the delivery is also mostly like a, long haul delivery. If you take like something like e-commerce, you'll have to split between long haul and then last mile delivery and then parcel shipment, then the complications actually increase manyfold. And then other supply chain which started showing up over the last 10-15 years is a cloud supply chain. I work in uh, cloud supply chain. So I think it's fascinating for me to see how cloud has come into existence. Conceptually, I'm not a technology person, but I could relate to it very much like e-commerce, like from a supply chain angle. All the corporates, like companies, used to have their own small data centers, and they used to run their servers there and service their own like enterprises. Now you bring everything into one big warehouse kind of thing called data center, and then through internet you're shipping all the packets like bits and pieces, and they're able to consume. That's a basic idea, and then is still in existence, still rapidly growing. All the companies are growing north of 30%. It's fascinating to see, and how this industry is playing out. Those are the two things I was able to see. I'm sure in the last 30 years with globalization, there is a huge sector which is formed around like ocean freight shipping and all that. But I am not actually that experienced or knowledgeable on that areas, honestly.
right. So yeah, yeah, right. So semiconductor or be it, the food industry and all the supply chains, I agree. It has been there for years, actually, for decades, actually. And kind of supply chain you're talking about is kind of stabilized. Yes, I agree that, you understand your business well, and but definitely, yes, in technology, as I said, right, the disruptions are there. And with those disruptions, the way the other verticals that get impacted is something is, it's very difficult to predict as such. And that does happen in every industry, I'm sure. Whenever there are disruptions, be it your e-commerce, cloud supply chain, as you mentioned, that's a new buzzword, I would say. That's a new upcoming industry. And as you mentioned, right, how basically, the data center, or, what could it's like a hosting company, right?
Yeah,
You basically centralize and then you decentralize in the sense like it has become like you're converting that hardware industry into a service industry, where you basically all the other companies to host onto
yeah,
your
exactly.
service,
It'll become a
right?
virtual good you're shipping through the internet
Exactly,
pipes.
right?
Yeah,
So, and that's how see, that's how the supply chain thing comes into the place. Like, people have come up with these ideas, but what actually drives from service point of view, that's where the supply chain comes to the place. How basically you forecast, and especially it is very difficult, especially in the upcoming, what should I say, the new sectors. Like today we are talking about cloud supply chain. And what I understand is, with these new industries, right, it becomes, the supply chain complex, it becomes even more complex because it's very difficult to protect. It's a new market. It's a new market. We
yeah,
really don't know how basically it is going to behave. How
yeah,
how it is going to scale up. Now, And the way you are going to react to it is what actually will separate your supply chain strategy compared to other supply chain
One
strategies,
thing I
right?
will tell you, like the differences I've seen working in a mature sort of sector to like a new evolving supply chain is, I think the approach completely changes. So in a normal matured supply chain, you're trying to balance your service with your cost and then write-offs and all that, right? But within that, you'll have some product lines which are growing a little bit and some product lines declining. But when the growth rates are north of 30%, it's all about meeting service. We're all working like gun ho to get the all the products ops running all cylinders, getting everything done. Optimization is not really thought about so much, and we that will happen over probably the period of time once it matures, because I have spent most of my time in careers like where like supply chain is matured. We are working on optimizing things, improving things, right? So here, like the cost of losing a customer is really big, and losing market share is even bigger. This is one of the learnings I had after like through the career is like supply chain. We talk about it as a separate thing, but supply chain essentially is a business function, and business strategy drives a lot of supply chain. And I'm highlighting this because new folks in supply chain career, like you hear all these case studies about Toyota, BMW, and all that. Like it's a very buzzwordy thing they put in business schools and other places. And a lot of it actually, in my mind, makes less sense. It's all about what the business wants to do, and then comes the supply chain. And supply chain can be like a core part of the strategy, but it's not so much that supply chain makes the calls and things happen. That thinking is completely flawed, and that's what is highlighted academically. Sorry, I just figured I wasn't recording until now. It's okay.
Yeah, that's
We'll
fine. That's fine. Yeah.
we'll
So what I
continue.
was saying was that
No, but
supply chain
to
does
bring it back from the, I think yeah, let me just say, you paraphrase what you're saying. You're talking about 2011, there was flooding in Japan, and that
exactly.
created a lot of supply chain issues because they were single sourced out of Japan, especially on the semiconductor. So I think we are seeing the same story repeat of recently when COVID hit, probably at a much bigger magnitude, because China has become the manufacturing plant of the world, and people were able to see how risky it is to actually have a single sourced manufacturer and manage supply chains only through ocean freight and not have any sort of resiliency in the system.
So yeah, so that brings a very important point. Like the companies, if you see, right, they actually if you see the first part of supply chain, it starts from your forecasting. It starts from your demand planning as such. How close your forecasting error to your actualization, actually makes or breaks companies' supply chain strategy. And also it does impact their bottom lines, because if your forecasting error is way too high, then you end up in a lot of either too much of inventories, or you'll be in a stock out situation every time, and that doesn't serve well for
Right.
the company's reputation, right? So this is just from demand planning. But if I come to supply planning, in supply planning, it's just not about capacity planning and all those things. You have to be looking into it. But what recently this COVID situation has told us, that you have to looking into the world economic affairs as well. How basically this world economic affairs, the what should I say, the relationship between the countries, the political affairs, how basically that is shaping up. It can actually have a very big impact on most of the companies. And as you rightly said, yes, especially if I speak about semiconductor, and these days you can see, right, recently in USA they have introduced this new act, I think, which I believe they call it as US Chips Act. And under this act, what they are trying to do is they are trying to establish semiconductors back in USA. And why it is a key step is they understand that today there's so much of dependence on China. uh, we can speak about, like, China is, like, they call it as a factory of the world, and that is true, because whatever we see in our house day to day, whether it is the chips, or any a toy, or any product you take, and most of the things comes from China. And let's assume if any supply disruptions happen, COVID is one of the cases we have seen, and or any political thing that happens, right? You don't want to be in a situation where actually your day-to-day thing suffers. And we know that semiconductor today, especially it's a part of our day-to-day life. It is not something a luxury, what I call it as. It's a part of your day-to-day life. And especially all the chips that go in all the electronic components, be it your TV,
Right.
fridge, phone, anything you take, right? Everything runs on these chips, right? And this is where I feel USA have realized that, being into this sector, it is very, very key and important for them that they are not too much on supply chain depends on the other countries, and they have to have their own fabs, own factories, so that they can have their bare minimum supply within their countries if something major happens outside. And this is where I believe that, this your core supply chain strategy is very, very important as such for any company to make sure that they have this continuous flow of materials and it doesn't disrupt their companies, not just reputation but their business as well. Actually,
Yeah, I
that's
just
very
want to
important.
highlight one thing as you were talking about CHIPS Act here. I want to go back to the technology arc and the inventions and how things happen in waves in human civilization. So, I mean, the chips have been there even like 10 years back, 15 years back, right? There was reasonable amount of demand and for like electrical engineers and like electronics engineers who work in this area. But this thing has really gone into a new orbit, especially as the computer science developments have gone like particularly in the last 10 years, the AML neural net developments, where the applications of those new methodologies could change how it could help like an end product like Facebook recommendations or Google search or as an example, right? So this is where I think we are entering a new wave of technological revolution where actually semiconductors become the heart of the action. And then between China and the US, they know clearly having all the capacities in Taiwan, which is closer to China, it is a huge risk for leadership. And if you look at world politics and general evolution, the technological leadership is extremely important to continue the world dominance as an economic power or somebody who can put a impact on others. So that's how it is. So that's where the arms race is right now. And then on a funny side, I mean, I never understood the supply chain risk manager position. I saw those positions like 10 years back. I'm like, what is the risk these guys are looking at? I never understood that. We understand the risk in finance because they're trying to understand who will default, what's happening. But what is this risk guy doing? I never understood. I think probably he never needed a job until now. I'm just kidding in a funny way because the real risk came only now. I
True,
don't think
true.
there was much of a risk before that. Uh, so yeah, I think this is where I'm going back to the point on the supply chain being a business decision. When decisions like this are made, it's not like a supply chain a VP or a president is making. It's a CEO level decision. Supply chain has the knowledge and the depth on the subject matter on where the sourcing can happen, what can happen. But essentially, it's a critical business decision on how we can actually continue the supply service our customers. So for a change, supply chain became a sexy word over the last 2 years.
That's good to hear. And as I said, rightly, we were talking about this, right? Post COVID, as I said, like we as a supply chain people, we understand the impact of it now. I hope the whole world understands the impact of supply chain. It has it.
Yeah, I think one day I want to explore this idea that I mean I'm realizing as you think about it, right? Generation to generation, the things we do on our own actually keeps dwindling in size. At some point, you are a farmer, you're making your own rice. Now you outsource that, you do like one specific thing. Specialization happens, and we keep outsourcing. When you keep doing that, essentially the supply chain nodes entering your house are increasing. I don't know, but at one point I want to actually make a count of how many nodes are coming through. Like it could be products, and if you do that to the sub parts and sub products, maybe all the products I'm using in a day-to-day life, I'm touching probably 80 countries. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. If you go to that level, yeah, you just not countries, how many distributors.
I'll give you like a funny example how it works. So there's a product I can recollect, like in one of the companies I'm working. So we want the product to be in US. I think it's related to coconut something. The coconuts are made in Thailand. They're shipped to Brazil. And then
Wow.
from Brazil, it comes to a plant in Mexico, gets manufactured there, and then comes to US. So, I and these are food products which have lower shelf life generally. So then imagine all of the products. What is the life cycle? I think
Oh,
we can wrap here today, and we'll figure out what topics to discuss uh, next week. I think whoever is watching, please subscribe, like, and comment. If you have any topics you would like to know or you have any questions, we are happy to engage with the community and learn mutually here.
Sure, definitely. Yes, we'll bring more videos related to supply chain, which is will be very, very informative, and we will also share from our experience how actually things work out in corporate. All right.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Satya. I think
Okay,
we'll
thanks
do
for
it
that.
next.